Good evening. Welcome to the RSU5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022, and we are here in the Freeport High School cafeteria. We have a full board here with us this evening, so we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the March 9th, 2022 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Colin and Susanna, thank you. All those in favor? Great, none opposed? Adjustments to the agenda.
Yes, I'd like to move up 15A and do that right after 8A. 15A is the consideration and approval to employ a principal at Pownell Elementary School.
Okay. All right. So we will move on to 6, good news and recognition. Report from our student rep, Piper.
Yesterday and today, students at the high school watched the main virtual career fair to learn about possible post-graduation jobs. Tomorrow, the preseason parent information night will be held to discuss spring sports as they are starting next week. The theater program at Freeport will be at the annual one-act competition at Camden Halls this Saturday after stellar performances last Saturday and Sunday. The save the date for prom was announced, being held at the Agora Grand Event Center on May 14th, and on April 13th, the junior class will be taking SATs and the sophomore class will be offered a college field trip.
Starting to get into that busy time of the year. All right. So we are at our first public comments. I don't see anybody. Okay. We do have another public comment at the end of our agenda. We also have public input on the budget a little bit later in the agenda, so we have a couple other opportunities. But in the meantime, we will move on to number 8, report from the superintendent.
All right, thank you. I have a few resignations to report. Heidi Miller, Freeport Middle School math teacher, and also Tom McKibben, effective at the end of the year, the teacher at Mass Landing School. And then lastly, I have one retirement to report, and that's of Bonnie Violet, Director of Instructional Support. And I believe this is a huge loss to our district. I have now worked with Bonnie for 10 years, first in RSU52 and now here. She's dedicated, passionate about students with disabilities, and is a master at working through very difficult conversations with parents, staff, and students. She has brought the department leaps and bounds from where they were when she first arrived here 7 years ago. She'll be very difficult to replace. We have already advertised for the position and have sent out a communication to everyone asking who may be interested in serving on the interview committee for her replacement, and I hope to be bringing a recommendation for that to the April 27th board meeting. So we do have a timeline outlined, and I think we're out there plenty early to get a good candidate to replace her. The board's next opportunity for professional development is tomorrow from 9:30 to 10:30. I know that several of you are attending. Principal Nickerson will give you a tour of Morris Street and then talk through all the components of their discipline plan. And this is a follow-up to the written overview you received about our behavioral supports earlier in the year. Equity update, we continue to welcome our newcomers. We now have 23 enrolled in our schools. The student voice opportunity that I've talked about at the high school that we're partnering with Cordigo continues. Now all the student-to-student interviews have been finished. They have met with the students. The students have been the first to analyze the data, and they're finishing their review of that data, I think, within the next week, and then they're going to present their findings to Principal Gulko and me sometime the week of April the 4th. In COVID news, in RSU5, we are now at 728 confirmed cases for the year. We've had 3 new cases this week, which continues with our positive trend. And because of these positive trends, community programs will be sending out a communication within probably the next day or so announcing that the unvaccinated or who are still wanting to participate in Camp Seaside or adult enrichment may sign up, but part of the requirements of this enrollment will be an agreement to show evidence of a negative COVID test within 48 hours of participating in the programming. At Camp Seaside, I've worked with Peter, and this would be done weekly, kind of like we're doing the pool testing in the schools right now, and would be conducted by community programs for those students that are not vaccinated. And as I mentioned in the last Q&A with community, our Puffin Seaside program, which is for our younger students, is filled up. But we still have spots available in our SEALS program, which services our kids in grades 3 through 5. And I also received another communication from the state that there still are free at-home COVID tests that are available for all Maine residents that can be accessed through the Project Access COVID-19 test. We also have had questions recently at our board meeting during public comment about what opportunities exist for the public to communicate with the board and the superintendent. We have researched this more and learned that under the law, it really doesn't require two-way communication. However, we in RSU5 are always happy to have these two-way conversations. And I just want to mention some of the ways for the public that we already feel like we're communicating with the public. We have our website, and it's got lots of information on it. We have community newsletters that we send out throughout the year. We have an active Facebook site that we do postings on. All of our minutes of our meetings and agendas are also posted on the website. Every board meeting, we have 2 public comment opportunities. We have advisory committees. We have a budget brochure that will be going out pretty soon that is sent annually to every household. And there are also still plenty of opportunities for two-way conversations. The email and phone numbers of every board member and the superintendent is posted on the website. There are multiple Q&As with board members during the budget season. We have every year 3 or more Q&As with the superintendent, where almost always there's at least one board member in attendance. And I just want to mention that there's the community's upcoming opportunities for more of these two-way communication is tonight, where we have a public comment agenda item on the budget. There's also at the next board meeting an informal Q&A at Pownell Elementary School cafeteria from 6 to 6:30. And so we're happy to receive any feedback or questions you may have then. Then there will be another opportunity on April the 27th at Durham Community School, and yet another Q&A on May 11th at Freeport High School. And I guess I just want to say publicly, I think I've worked in maybe 5 school districts throughout my career, and I'm really proud of the opportunities that this board provides for the public to interact with them. It's more than any other district that I've been in. So kudos to this board on that. Then I just have the budget update. You have in front of you on purple kind of spring-like paper. We have added the additional time for the athletic trainer, and this results in a 4.22% increase with an overall estimated tax impact of 2.88%. And other than that, that's my only budget update tonight. And then I'm excited to announce that the Greater Freeport Chamber of Commerce has selected the staff of RSU5 to receive the 2022 LL Bean Community Involvement Award. This award is given to an organization that has shown a true passion for supporting the community, and the Chamber said they couldn't think of anyone more deserving than the staff of RSU5 for this year's award. The award will be presented on March 31st at the Harrisseekett Inn from 6:30 to 8:30. I'll be attending with the presidents of the associations, Jen Winkler, Anne Marie Spazuko, and Nancy Dyer. And they're all excited to attend that event with me. And I'm just thrilled for the staff of RSU5 to be recognized for all of the hard work they have done for the past 2 years in educating our students. It hasn't been easy, but they have risen to the challenge. And it's just nice to have this kind of public recognition. And so my last piece of news is late-breaking news that I think I got around 4, that one of our high school students, Minka Holtrop, we just learned that her drawing, and I'm going to slaughter this pronunciation Zoom as a biology major, it's something Kingdom Animalia, was selected as the National Gold Medal recipient in the National Scholastic Art and Writing Competition. She was also selected for the American Visions Medal, which is the Best in Show from Maine. And I think there will be a ceremony to honor the recipients in New York City. So I think she has some really exciting times in front of her. But I wanted to read her statement about her drawing because I just felt that it is so beautiful, and it just represents the kind of student that we have here at Freeport High School. She said that her drawing addresses species extinction and the diminishing of biodiversity. It does this by taking the negative space of leaves that I found in my yard and filling their surroundings with all the animals I could think of. The negative space of the leaves represents the hole that these lost species will leave in the world when they're gone. There is not only a loss of beauty with declining biodiversity, we rely on it in so many ways that I don't think we have even found them all out yet. The biodiversity and complex ecosystems account for the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the purification of the water we drink. I have a personal connection to this as part of the future generation. Not only would I like to survive, but I want to thrive and live in a world that is still beautiful. I want to swim in coral reefs and look up at towering trees and not think this will all soon be gone. So congratulations to her and this beautiful piece of art, and I sent it to the board, and I think you'll be very moved by the art. It's wonderful. And that completes my report.
Okay, well, I think it's back to you, right, for 15A?
Yes. So I'm excited to be recommending Holly Johnson, who is here this evening, by Lisa, who has come to support her and to begin the important work of the transition, ensuring that we do have a very smooth transition at PES. And I'm happy to be recommending her as the next principal at PES. The interview team is excited that she's building upon the wonderful foundation that Lisa has laid down over the past 12 years. Holly has a master's in literacy and a CAS in educational leadership. She has served as a literacy coach in some capacity since 2007. She also served as the principal at Hiram Elementary School for 2 years before becoming the assistant principal / literacy coach for the past 8 years at Longfellow School in Portland. I had the pleasure of working with Holly for the year that I was in Portland, and I can personally attest to her dedication to all student success, her commitment in advancing equity for the most underserved students, and her passion for ensuring that all teachers continue to grow professionally. So please join me in welcoming Holly to RSU5 and PES. I know we have to vote. But I'm just assuming
That would
you're
be
going
awkward.
to vote. Yes, that would be.
Okay. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ Holly Johnson as the principal at the Pownell Elementary School for the 2022-2023 school year? Beth and Jen, thank you. Any comments, questions? I'm just going to shout out the committee for their work. I know as we all know, these hiring committees are a big investment of time and effort. So I know, and with 27 candidates for this position, which I think speaks wonders to the Pownell Elementary School, I know that's a lot of time and effort, and I am super excited to get to know Holly. So all those in favor? None opposed. Welcome, Holly. All right. So we are at our second opportunity for public input on tonight's budget around on the agenda as it relates to the 2023 school budget. I don't see we've had any more public join us. So I guess we will move on to administrative reports, and we'll start with Peggy, Finance.
Good evening, everybody. We just, as a finance committee, met with our auditor, Marge Hall, and she went over her preliminary audit report. And we expect that to be all finalized and submitted before our deadline on the 31st. So, and we have plans to start very soon with her for next year's process. In your packet, you received the financial statement for the month of February, and as it's mentioned also in the minutes of our last finance meeting, we have been looking through these with the new software program. We've been looking through things with a fine-tooth comb, and we've recognized a few things and reporting issues and such as that. So the finance committee will be seeing a new format on these reports starting in March, and then you will see them as well. So I would request that you ignore the last line of the report that's in your packet. Due to an adjustment that we made, there's a 29-cent variance between the income and expenses on this. So therefore, it resulted in what on the right-hand side on the very last line, what at first glance appears to be a 58.6% change. It's actually 29 million and 58.6% change because of that 29 cents left in that area, which I know exactly where that is, and we will get that rectified. So just to let you know about that. But in the review of the financials, do feel very comfortable with where we are. We have, through the month of February, 67% of the year has gone by, and we have paid 55% of our expected expenditures. And so that, we feel that that's going to be fine. With a 2-year review, we look back at February 2020, as 2021 wouldn't really be comparable with everything that was happening. But a review of February 2020, we're really in line with where we were at that point. So we are feeling very comfortable with that. And thank you for your consideration and time reviewing the budget.
Any questions for Peggy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are on to the board comments and committee reports portion of the agenda. So board information exchange and agenda reports. So any other report outs on committees, requests for discussions around items, agenda requests, that sort of thing. Maura.
I just wanted to report back for the board about our recent MSBA regional meeting. We had a pretty good attendance, and it was nice to speak with other folks from area school boards, kind of hear their experience going through COVID, and we're not alone, of course, in some of the challenges that we've been facing. And I forwarded to the board an email, a follow-up email that we got that had a couple of resources that were distributed at the meeting, including a video about interacting with the legislature and testifying. And there's also another video. The one about testifying is really great. And I haven't watched one yet about parliamentary procedure, but I'm sure that's useful as well. So those are two videos that MSBA produced to share with and help educate school board members. So I think I forwarded them all to you. But if you don't have it in your inbox, just let me know and I can make sure to get that to you. We also got legislative updates on a few key bills, and I think that's about it in terms of things we discussed that were relevant. And this was prior to some COVID decisions being made, so we all shared our experiences around masking and things like that. It was just kind of helpful. It's always helpful to hear what's going on in other districts. So thank you.
Thank you, Maura. One of the things that I've been sort of thinking about over the last month or so, as we've dealt with primarily the masking or the unmasking in the schools, and the community involvement we've seen at our board meetings and our inboxes. I know Dr. Foley spoke to different opportunities for community members to communicate with us, which I think is fantastic. When you lay it all out there, it does seem like there's a lot of opportunities for folks. But, you know, I also can appreciate some of the frustration that our public comment participants have felt over the last month of, you know, they share things that they feel very passionately about, but, you know, we're not in a position to answer that in the moment. And, you know, just what the process is, what does the school boards, what is our role as it relates to, you know, comments from the public? What is our role as it relates to answering questions? And I know, you know, sort of boardsmanship emails and boardsmanship workshops in the past, we've talked about what the role of the board is and how we can be good board members, and how the process works for our board meetings. But obviously, for folks that are either newer to the board or community members that wouldn't have been at those, I've been thinking on the idea of, should we have sort of just a little workshop around what is it, you know, what is the school board's, what is our obligations, how do we do what we do, what are our policies that surround these things, you know. So if you're sending an email to 11 people and you're kind of expecting 11 people are going to respond and only one does, you can see why maybe they feel unheard. Whereas if they knew we had a policy or a practice that, you know, that one person responds so that you're not inundated with 11 answers or 11 emails back, you know, maybe you feel a little better about that response from the board. So I've been thinking about that. I'm not sure what it would look like. You know, I think we do have some resources available to us. Zune pointed out to me, I mean, I walk by it at every board meeting, but over on the counter over there next to the agendas, we have a little pamphlet about what the board, like, how does the board meeting run? You know, what are the obligations of the board? How do we perform what we do? What is the public participation policy? But we don't necessarily point that out to folks to take a look at before, you know, for new members. So, you know, I've been thinking about some ideas on how we can make that more visible. Can we sort of post it to the front page of our website? Could we do a small workshop where we talk about it, and the video clip of that we could put on the website so folks that aren't in attendance that night could still access it without having to sort through every board meeting we've ever had since the beginning of time? Just things I've been thinking about, and I'm curious what others' thoughts are. Maddie.
I think that as a board, we are really dedicated to communication and transparency. And for me, that's been a frustration of the last month or so, because with all our efforts over the years, they're rarely well attended. And then all of a sudden there's an issue and they're very well attended and people don't really know how it works. I find that frustrating. I think it could be a good thing for us to do something that's a little more visible. I'm not sure about a workshop during a board meeting. We have big agendas. We have a lot to do, and we're still catching up from, you know, from the lag from last year. So I don't know that I would, I mean, I'm not opposed to it necessarily, but I don't know. I don't know how useful that would be. I'm thinking more of something like a video or an interview. You know, maybe in the summer months, you could be interviewed, or you could even do it, you could ask to be interviewed for the piece that Becky usually does in the forecaster. And we put a link to that up on the front page, or a little video interview, or something that's consumable and digestible and short. Because I do, because the other thing I would like to underscore, I think we could take the opportunity to underscore it there, is that we really value input. It's difficult when you have 30 people lined up to say the same thing to you, although it certainly does convey the importance of the issue. But I'm always so appreciative when people take time to write an email or come to a meeting, take time out of their lives. To me, that shows dedication to the community. So I think that an interview or a video could serve those two purposes: convey our appreciation and invite people to understand why we look so stone-faced when you're telling us how you feel.
Jen.
I'm glad you brought this up, Michelle, because I've been thinking about it as well. The one thing that I have a difficult time with is I feel that the response that's wanted is like a personal opinion of mine on how I feel as a board member towards one situation, which, as I think we all know, my personal opinion on this board is not we vote as one, right? I mean, I'm not articulating this right, but like my own one vote doesn't matter. It only matters is how the vote comes out for the board. And so I feel like it would be very difficult to have, you know, back and forth conversations with people on really heated topics, because I feel like if I was presented, you know, if that opportunity came up, I would just sort of reiterate what we say at the board meeting, which is we had decided, talking about masks, let's say, we had decided to follow the CDC. That's our, and we didn't waver from that, but it seemed that people wanted to continually know what's your personal opinion? You know, you're not wearing a mask now, so that must mean that you didn't want masks. So I feel like it would be really difficult to open that door, because I don't want to get into like back and forth conversations with someone about my personal opinion. I certainly would share, just like I did, like we're following the CDC guidelines. And I feel that was a good enough answer. I mean, and we were publicly saying that. So I think it's a really difficult kind of spot. You know, I felt when we kept getting those emails, like I felt bad that we weren't responding. You know, I definitely could see that as being something that was viewed as we weren't listening. But at the same time, I think it does open a door for like 11 separate conversations about 11 separate things, and everyone has a sort of take on it. So I'm not sure. I mean, where I've gotten to is that I don't have an answer. I just have sort of come up with issues that would that would come up if we were to open that line of communication more. So
yeah, I can see that, you know, potentially being an issue. And we do vote as a group, and I appreciate your approach of, you know, we have decided as a group to follow the CDC guidelines, and that's what we've stuck to. You know, anybody who's been to the MSMA conference and done the boardsmanship session where they show the guy who's at the grocery store like bad-mouthing the decision the board made about something, and you're just like shaking your head like, oh no, we can't be doing that, right?
Yeah.
You know, once the decision is made, we can disagree here, we can have a conversation here, we can, you know, have a respectful discussion about something, and Lord only knows that we have not all 11 always been on the exact same, position on everything in the last however many years. But once we vote, the board has, our code of ethics says that we will support the decision of the board. So I appreciate that approach that folks have.
That's what I wanted to say. You said it really well.
You said it great. I liked Maddie's idea of maybe an interview or an article. I mean, I agree that we have very busy agendas, and I don't necessarily think the members of the board would get a ton out of a workshop. I was just trying to come up with a way to try and meet that need. So I might hit you up for that. Beth?
I definitely agree with sort of what everybody has said, or Maddie and Jen. And I guess I was sort of thinking around something about I don't know, we got an example, and I can't remember who sent it, but it came, I think, from the MSBA, and around a website that was sort of redesigned around the board specifically. Like there were some pictures and like an individual, description of the board member, and maybe to make board members more human or something. And then also, it is frustrating. I feel the frustration around that we have these policies and procedures in place, and then, people that we're following, and people decide that, that's not what they want us to do. And so, but somehow making it more, easily accessible, like this is why, this is what the board's policy is. I mean, it's all on the website, but you have to go and look for it. So if there would be some way to make it like more compact, sort of like bullet points, this is what we do, maybe like that flyer, but updated. I'd totally be in support of something like that. But again, I do, I think that we have, the way it's set up, communication is for a reason. And and I agree with Jen that it would be really messy if we did a lot of back and forth. So.
Susanna?
Sort of picking up on what I think everybody's said so far. I don't know that, I'm new, but I'm not as new as other people. I feel I'm fairly confident I'm not sure that a workshop is really something that we would get that much out. I think, questions that we have amongst ourselves can be clarified, is my feeling, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but sort of where I am. Where I feel that most communication needs to happen is with the public, where people are emailing us and saying, hey, this is what the board says, but as Jen alluded, what are your opinions? Off record, can you please tell me? And, then getting follow-up about, you're not listening, you're not whatever. So and I don't know, I like the idea that Maddie brought in, sort of a forecaster article, something that sort of gets a little bit out there in the public, something that we can link to later. If we have, right on the website next to our contact information, something right there about how communications work. So, a really straightforward bulleted thing about, if you email the board, you will get one response, per policy. If you, come to a morning Zoom session with the superintendent, this is what that would look like. So look at what those ways of communication are and what they each entail. So if I'm a member of the public and I did want some two-way communication, what are my options, rather than just sort of having to look for that info. So I like the idea of an article that explores some of that, or some topic around that, but then something that's maybe very clear. And maybe that's even something that, Michelle, in the bottom of your emails, you can just have in a signature or something of, or just throw it out there in responses of sort of for more information on communication, or something that can be sort of just nonchalantly thrown around a little bit to get it out there.
It's a good idea. Bali?
Yeah, I wanted to suggest that that information gets included in the email that you send back to anybody who writes, and so that they understand what are the parameters for getting a response for their email, and also give them the option, if you want to have a two-way conversation, this is not the forum, but these are the opportunities for you to do that. In addition to that, anytime that we have a chance to describe a process that they can follow if they have an issue and they email us, say if they have a personal issue or whatever, then we can respond with the steps of chain of command. This is how it works. This is what we recommend you do. I had, as a parent before joining the board, an issue with a staff member, and I emailed a board member, and it was super helpful for that board member to say, actually, the way you follow through with this is contact such and such, and if you're not happy with that response, contact such and such. As a member of the community, you don't necessarily know how that works, and it's super helpful for someone to tell you to do that. And also, if there's an issue that we're about to discuss that will be on an agenda, upcoming agenda, to mention that in the email. Any information pertinent about process to the issue that they are trying to resolve, I think is super helpful and not easily found.
Yeah, it's a good point about that sort of chain of command thing, because I think what we've seen in the last month or so has been really district level discussions, right? Not something that would work through the teacher, principal, Becky board line, but most things, that's where they belong. So outlining that too is, I think, a good idea. Colin.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether, I'm not sure what the appropriate method would be, but I wonder, and it might be right now, to communicate to the community the process that if indeed one of the board members does change their mind about a particular matter that has been discussed, how that would proceed, how that would unfold at a particular meeting or between meetings, because I think that also is a part of what I think some of the frustration that we are hearing is, if I'm hearing it correctly, is sort of a sense of, because I don't, it's not that once we have discussed something, it can no longer ever be discussed ever in the future. It's just that, to your point, unless we decide to re-engage an issue, the question of decorum and practice is to remain on point in terms of what we've discussed. But does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah, and conversations. I mean, I have had one-on-one conversations with folks over the last week, which I think were helpful. I was able to answer some questions that they had that I couldn't answer on the spot in the middle of a board meeting, which I think was appreciated. It always feels better when you're having a conversation, you're getting something on the other side. But one thing I was clear with the folks I spoke with was, this is not a board of, we don't just go with the flow on anything, right? I mean, this is not a board that's unwilling to raise their hand and say, I think we should revisit this, or, or I don't agree with, what we've decided, and I'd like to talk about it. So I have sort of driven that point home. Usually how that would work, if it's something that we're not even talking about, is usually they would come to Becky and I and say, hey, is this something that we might be able to put on an agenda to revisit or discuss again? There's, speaking to the parliamentary stuff, I mean, there are things you can do to revisit a vote. They're pretty technical. Usually you have to do them within the same board meeting or the next board meeting. But there are ways to sort of reopen an issue if there was a desire to do so. And just for board members' benefit, usually how that would work is, it wouldn't be just because one person said, geez, I want to vote on that again, that we would necessarily put it back on the agenda for a vote again, right? We'd probably have a discussion about it. We'd probably, similar to wanting to table something, right? If you don't feel like you're ready to vote, if everybody else is ready, then we move forward. If everybody goes, yeah, I think we could use a revisit of that, then we officially have a conversation about it. So I think there are avenues, to your point of, a year and a half ago I felt this way, but I don't feel that way anymore. I think we should do something different. I think there are ways to accomplish that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just, I suppose just to follow up on the amount of feedback we were receiving on the unmasking, to help the community understand that given those procedures, which we have in place, if we are not at the next meeting calling for a new discussion of an issue, if that is not becoming part of the agenda, it's not an absence of consideration, or that we haven't heard what people have been saying. It's that the board members individually have chosen to not bring that before Becky or before you, Michelle. So again, it just sort of more of an understanding of that, I think, might be healthy for the community.
Michelle, I totally agree with you, and it's been on my mind too. I'm just wondering, this is a good discussion, but would it be worthwhile to put, not a workshop or anything, but to put an item on the agenda where we could decide what we wanted to do about this communication issue? There have been lots of good ideas, but this may not be the time to say, oh, we're going to do an article in the Forecaster and we're going to do this and that, but to put it on an agenda and as a group make a decision about what we want to do.
I mean, this sounds strangely like a strategic communication opportunity. Thanks, Candy. No, yeah. I was gonna say, I think you're meeting on Friday, and I'm happy. I can't this Friday, but I'm happy to attend one of your meetings to talk about that with you guys, if that's helpful. To sort of nail down a plan, which we could then report out during this section of a future board meeting, and get some feedback and input around so that's a good idea. Zune. Mike.
I think the public misunderstands that we are publicly elected, but we're not answerable to the public, unlike other public offices. We're elected by the public, but we're answerable to the DOE. From conversations I have heard, many members of the public does not understand that basic difference.
Yeah, it is sort of a unusual twist that is really just the school boards that deal with that, right? So, town councils and select boards, it's very different, right? It's the constituents as the people in the town or the part of town you represent. That's not the case in the school district. I mean, for very specific reasons, and it's in statute that way. Yeah.
Right. I'm also concerned about opening the meeting to a two-way communication. It is pretty clear that our policies and procedure evolve over time, and that what has been decided, which we follow, is perhaps born out of perhaps not so pleasant experience. And in a two-way conversation in the board, first, it is very easy for the situation to get escalated out of hand. And given the level of frustration, that is a real possibility. Also, besides the 3-minute rules, how does one end such a two-way conversation in a graceful way? That could be very difficult. So those are my 2 comments.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we were to open up the board meetings to two-way conversations, I think that's a Pandora's box we can't close. And to Maddie's point, we have very full agendas and full jobs that we are expected to accomplish as the elected members of the school board, outside of potentially whatever the discussion with folks is that day. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say one more thing. There's also public disclosure rules. Anything we say here is part of public record. When a meeting is open to two-way conversation, it's very hard to gauge the consequences of our answers at that moment. It's easier to see it in retrospect, and by then it might be too late. Thank you.
Mara.
Thanks for bringing this up, Michelle, and everyone. I agree with your comments. Another thing that's been on my mind and that I feel is kind of the elephant in the room around this is respectful discourse. And I really feel like our community in some way needs to come together or have a dialogue around disagreeing in a respectful way. And I feel as a board, we set a really great example for that, of how you can disagree with each other and still have productive and respectful conversations. I don't have a solution to this, but it does make me extremely concerned because we're elected officials. So I think on some level, you know, we can all expect that, expect the heat from the community. But what really concerns me is how our staff are treated and teachers are treated. And I think we've seen other places, teachers and staff coming under fire because, you know, parents or whomever in the community disagrees with them. And so I don't know, that's been on my mind. Like I said, I don't have a solution for it, but it worries me. And I think we all know it's a problem, not just in this district, but in this country, that people can't disagree respectfully. And I think we have to set an example for our children of how to do that. And I think as a board, continue to do that too.
I agree. And I think that was one of the reasons it was important to have those 2 days, right, between the vote and the unmasking, so that our staff could have those conversations with kids and, you know, try and set those good examples of how you may disagree about what the decision was, but how we're all community members here together. So, all right. Any other? I think we just used all of the public input on the budget time, so good job, guys. Any other board information exchange agenda requests? All right, so I will move to finance. Beth.
Yes. We had a meeting on March 9th, and we also met again today, which you are aware, as Peggy mentioned, we met with the auditor. And so we are just kind of doing what we do and looking at the budget and going through. Peggy takes, again, wonderful minutes. I feel like I have nothing to add. You can certainly read the minutes, and just if anybody has any questions. Zune has definitely grown in his understanding of the budget, and any questions I think should be directed to him because he is very good at it. So, and of course I'll take questions too if anybody has any.
All right. Yeah, great job on the minutes, Peggy. These are very informative. Sometimes I learn things from the meeting I was at, so. All right, policy. Candy.
Okay. Last time we met was March 4th, and you've got the minutes in your folder, and we took a look at 3 policies. One is a draft for a brand new policy, memorials and remembrances, and we worked on it for about 4 months, and you'll have a first vote on that tonight. We also revised the suspension of students policy, which is going to come to you next month. We're still looking at a little bit of a language change. And finally, we reviewed a proposed new policy on sustainability and felt we needed to get more input from the directors of nutrition and facilities and transportation before it comes back to the policy committee to look at again before we bring it to you. So that's where we are.
All right. And with that, Cynthia is coming up.
Hi, good evening. So before you tonight for second read, we have the wellness policy. If you remember, last time it was just that paragraph that we deleted due to the nutrition audit. So I don't really have anything further to say about that wellness policy.
Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of second read for policy JL, student wellness? Maddie and Susanna, thank you. Any questions for the committee or Cynthia on that one? All right, all those in favor? None opposed, great.
Okay. Let me just turn my page here. So the next policy that we have is the workplace bullying policy. And So this workplace bullying policy has come to you because it is in law that we have a policy now. So we have to have the workplace bullying policy. It was one of the ones that came into effect October 18th. And just to give you a little history, school employees have been protected against harassment based on protected characteristics already. And this new law adds a new and different protection that is against the so-called workplace bullying. So the law protects all school employees, including administrators, from bullying by other employees, by students, by parents, and others associated with public schools. Others associated with public schools is really could include vendors, coaches, volunteers, any contracted service providers that we have. So I just wanted to give you that little background. We have policies that cover the protected classes, but this is an additional policy. And so we have the policy defines what workplace bullying is and what it is excluded from that. And then makes reference, if you go on to the second page of it, about, if it's somebody that's covered under collective bargaining agreement, that would be handled through that way. If it's a student, they would be handled in an appropriate student discipline procedures. Parents and others that are have engaged in the bullying will be dealt with in a manner appropriate to the particular circumstances, which could mean a lot of things. It could mean if there's a parent, a need for a meeting, that the principal is always there, for example. And this was drafted by Durham Woodsum, so.
So this is a brand new policy as well?
Brand new.
So both of the first reads are new policies?
Yes.
Okay. So just a quick question, kind of, Mara's question kind of triggered it for me.
Yeah.
The other, what did you call them? Other related?
Like the vendors. So I called
Would
them.
that include parents? So if we're
Yes.
talking. Okay.
Parents, yes.
So if
I
we
thought
had-
I said parents. If I didn't,
might
I'm
have.
sorry.
Okay. I was thinking it through and might have not heard it. So
Okay.
It just
Sorry.
sort of to Mara's point about
Yes.
sort of trying to protect our staff from potentially people who may be unhappy with our policies and taking it out on our teachers and our staff.
Right.
This policy would protect that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So do I have a motion for consideration and approval for first read of policy GBGB workplace bullying? Susanna and Colin, thank you. Any other questions for Cynthia or the committee on this one? Great. All those in favor? None opposed.
Great. All right, and the last, we put these separate on purpose in case there was more discussion that was needed. So the last policy is also a new policy, and that is titled, we came up with our title, Memorials and Remembrances. And as you heard from Candy a few minutes ago, we spent at least 4, maybe 5 meetings. I actually added a meeting. There's a lot of thought put into this policy, and we do have one. I do have one correction to point out to you. It was noticed this afternoon, and Maddie brought it to our attention. We all had this document. We were all shared on it and worked on it. So we just missed this before it was printed out. So if you go to the second page, the last bullet that is in the allowable section, oops. Let's see. The wording you can see is choppy. I'm trying to find the new copy. Maddie, would you mind reading how it should be? I printed it out, but I don't seem to have it in my papers with me.
So the corrected last bullet would be contribution, open parentheses, such as money, plants, and service, close parentheses, may be made to existing memorial gardens like the one installed at Freeport High School for all district RSU loss without particularly naming the lost individual.
Yeah, Maddie.
I wanted to imagining we may have some discussion about this, but I wanted to sort of give you all a sense of how we tried to take this on. We wanted to be really holistic in our perspective on this. We know that there was a particular issue that brought this to the policy committee, but we didn't want to just, you don't create policy to answer one particular issue. You create policy to in thinking about anything that might arise. So we tried to make sure that we did that, which is why it took a lot of time. We looked at some other existing policies. Colin did some great work bringing some other language from other policies, and even spoke to the director of the Centers for Grieving Children. I believe that's who you spoke to. So one of the notes that I took, and I think some of this may be direct language, the first time we met to discuss this, that I thought would be helpful for you all just to bear in mind, is that we want to be in service to all of our children and focus on being a grief-friendly environment with equitable treatment of all losses. And then there's this concern about reconciling our concerns about potential ideation with concerns that we have about the mental health of our students. And we reconcile that by not particularizing individual deaths. So that, for me, provided a bit of a philosophical framework that was helpful as we crafted this policy, and I thought might be helpful for you all to hear.
Molly.
Thank you for all your work. This is a really difficult one, especially because it's so emotional for so many people. So I think you did a great job with this. I am wondering, and would like to hear the response from the board, about possibly installing or allowing for the installation of one group permanent memorial for all deceased staff and students, to which names of deceased people could be added 1 year or more after the death or after the event. I mean, based on all that I've read, the ideation concerns, all of those are for immediate response to a death, but if you let enough time go by, then those concerns really are lessened by time. And I have read other policies where there are situations where there's a group memorial and names are added a considerable amount of time after people are in pain or there are concerns about other students or staff just following with their own desire to just kill themselves, basically. So I don't know if you have considered that. I think that would be a really nice way to memorialize people without falling into a situation where we may add risk or danger to other staff and students who work or attend school.
We did discuss that, and I'm going to share my best recollections of that, and I hope that my colleagues will fill in any blanks. The difficulty in something like that is what kinds of deaths and at what point in a person's life do we deem as a district should be memorialized in such a way. Grief accompanies any loss, whether somebody dies of a long-term illness or after having lived a healthy life after a long time. I would find it really challenging, and I wouldn't want anyone on our staff to be responsible for making that kind of a decision. You know, who is appropriately memorialized on such a sculpture or a tree or something like that? What's appropriate and what's not? I don't know how we ask our staff to make that call.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that anyone would make particular decisions. I thought that anyone who is a current staff or a current student, regardless of how they die, as long as they're either employed or attending school, may be included in that memorial unless the family decides that they don't want that. But they all have that opportunity. I mean, that was my line of thinking.
Jen?
So I had the same thought as Volley as far as thinking if there was one place for the entire RSU. I also agree with...
Is your mic on?
Sorry, it is, but I'll pull it closer. I also had the same exact thought as Volley, which it would be if someone was employed or if someone was in school at the time of their death. And if anyone, and if a family member did not want that, we would respect that. I'll be totally honest. I'm wondering if I'm clouded because I am, and I know Valley is as well, close to the situation that brought this whole thing up. So I am kind of thinking of that. So I don't want to get clouded in that. But I do want to say that I think when a child passes away, that they obviously become that age for eternity, whatever age they pass. And I think that it does bring comfort to people to have sort of a memorial when that time was. So I'm just trying to think about if it would, after a year's time or something, if it would be an appropriate time to then allow those people that knew that person to have a place that was close to them. I am not going to die on that hill for sure. I would agree that if that was something that everyone thought was, a possibility, I could see that being okay. But I also, I know you guys worked really hard on this policy and know a lot more than what we do because you did all the research. So I do appreciate that as well. I think that what you have is really fantastic. I think the only thing I would have said is similar to what Vali said.
Other comments? Zune.
From my experience working with families with grief in my line of work, I have learned that what has been said here a few minutes ago is true. Grief comes in well-defined stages, and given time, in almost all cases, that grief passes and life goes on. So I'm proposing a consideration for somewhere between the ideas that I've heard here. On one side, there is no names attached to the memorial, and the other side of that is to have names attached to the memorials. And that brings issues such as who decides what name, or whether or not the default should be, yes, the name's there unless the family object. I would like the board to consider the possibility that there is an avenue, use the memorial as an avenue for the immediate expression of the grief of the community of those involved. So, for example, at that memorial, at the time of, say, a person passing away, that the community, the school, the friends, the teachers, classmates have a place, say, to bring flowers, and with the understanding that that will not be permanent, that after, say, a fixed amount of time, all that will be cleared. No names is left there on a permanent basis. In a way, not having it permanent allows that grief to pass better than just having that place where people feel the need to come back time after time after time. So it might solve, it might address both concerns.
Maddie.
I think this is an interesting discussion. One very practical concern I have is we have 6 different schools. And, we might as a board feel like an appropriate place would be the Freeport High School, because everyone eventually comes here, one hopes. But what if a child is lost at Pownell Elementary? There's no attachment to that. And there's no ability to place flowers there for the children who are grieving that loss at that time. would we want to consider having something like this at every school? I know that there are existing places. We have a garden at the high school. I think that I don't know if it's Durham or Pownell. I feel like there's a garden at another school that I heard about. I don't know, I think this is something we would need to, if we want to do something like what's been proposed, we need to be extremely thoughtful about that.
I'm torn. I mean, I see why people would want something permanent. I just don't know if a school is the right place for it. You know, the opportunity to grieve in the moment and over time for students and staff. I just don't think it's, I don't know. I'm trying to visualize something that doesn't seem, I don't know. I'm not sure how it would look or how it would feel to pass that every day. I don't know. I'd be concerned with that. Susanna.
I guess one other concern I have is, having faced this issue a handful of times, certain students or faculty, I mean, it doesn't really matter who it is at the moment, but certain students, faculty get they're a lot more tied into the community. And I guess I am sort of concerned that, you know, I don't want a situation where one student dies and there's a lot of pressure to do something for that student and not pressure for somebody else. Or, you know, you get something where if you were to say we're going to add somebody's name after the fact, you know, certain parents, certain community members are going to be more proactive for certain students than others. And I guess I'm just sort of cautious about how you ensure that students are recognized equally. And that doesn't necessarily, equally doesn't need to be the same. That doesn't mean you need to have flowers left in the same spot, whatever. But, you know, if you allow putting the name of something that, you know, to make sure that every student, every faculty has that actual opportunity, and it's not just the ones that the community really speaks out to, or, you know, like not just here, but other places where a certain student left a big impact, so that student deserves to be recognized or memorialized, whereas some other student didn't. And so I guess I'm just sort of concerned on that level. And maybe encouraging or looking back, you know, looking back at things like scholarships or other ways that are different ways that you can honor students. And I know there's a comment in here about that, but I might be interested in going in that route or just thinking more in that direction at the moment, but I'm not really sure. I'm just sort of concerned about the equity of different students and faculty members.
Is your hand up, Colin? Okay. I wasn't sure if you're just using your pen.
Yeah, and just to Susanna's point, that was very much at the forefront of our thinking. As Maddie said in our conversation, in my conversation with the Center for Grieving Children, just the emphasis that they put upon creating an environment and at the school as a whole that is, and I'll admit I found the language a little bit awkward, but I think it's probably the most accurate language, but a grief-friendly environment where, as Maddie said, that all losses are treated equally. And I think that's even just those two things, putting aside everything else, that's incredibly difficult to put responsibility to put on the administrators, on the teachers, on the staff, on how to do that. And I think one question that did arise is whether or not we feel that that currently our faculty and staff have the resources necessary to be able to create that. So I think that's just one sort of larger question that we raised. But I think what you see here is very much coming from a place of how do we create a place that fulfills that goal while also making sure that students and faculty and staff have a place to experience their grief. And I think I didn't realize that I was doing it, but I think that community and parents is not part of that list in terms of what happens on school grounds. And I think that was also part of the question of to your point, Michelle, where is the location where the primary place of grief or of memorial should be taking place. I mean, I very much appreciate what Vale and Jen said, and I've been turning in my head sort of the question of how, and returning to what Maddie and Candy and I discussed, of how we would address the question of inclusion. And I think in addition to the point around and Vale, to your clarification of like current students and faculty, is that I think we did discuss the fact that it would be the policy, if we went in a direction like that, I think would have to be that the default is that everyone is listed, that's in policy, that is a given, and that then, which speaks, I think, a bit to Susanna's concern in terms of advocacy. So it would not be that the community is advocating for the inclusion of a name, or a family, or the onus is put on a family to advocate for the inclusion of a name. But rather, it's, to Vale's point, if they do not want to be included in that. So I think that very much was part of our discussion. I think we had some discomfort with the kind of the automaticness of that, if I'm remembering correctly, in our conversation, that it would just be a matter of course that a name would go on such a memorial. I think that was also, I'm not remembering all of the details of that conversation, but I remember we did feel a little uncomfortable about that. I suppose I think because I'm not here at the high school very much, the realization that we do have an existing memorial garden here at the high school, which I still don't know a great deal about, and I think also some questions around care and what are the resources that are available for the long-term care of that. But I think that very much was in the spirit of saying, all right, both for if someone wanted to plant something there in remembrance, it is really a long-term, within the life of plants, that is, contribution to the community, and the creation in a way of what Zune is speaking of as well, a creation of a space where students could experience their grief and kind of know that that's part of the space that is being created and the environment that is being created.
Jill.
Well, first, I just want to point out that it's not lost on me that this all began with a public comment that we listened to, and now we're sitting here and talking about a policy. So I think that needs to be pointed out, that we do listen and we do respond in the way that it's been outlined, because I think this is a really important issue. The last bullet under allowable, I think for me, I think every school in our district should have a space, because I think outdoor spaces are very important to our learning environment for a variety of reasons, and this is just one piece. I think being outside, I think coming together as a group to do something, whether it's just pull the weeds, make the memorial garden a little fresher as a group, is really a great way to start healing. So I'd love for us to think about having those spaces at all the schools, not just here at the high school. For the reason that was mentioned earlier, sometimes we lose people that may never get to the high school. So I think that's important. And then just for clarification, because I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but with the last bullet point, with the community use of school facilities, if an organization wanted to use the turf field as a fundraiser in memory of someone who passed. Is that an allowable thing? Like, or is that just to clarify, is that something that's allowable?
I think the answer is yes, because I think we actually had like a lacrosse tournament last summer around that. So I do think that's an allowable use. One of my questions is, I'm trying to find the specific language. Fourth bullet of not allowable. The school unit will not install permanent memorials, which I think we've talked about, such as trees, nor any items to be accepted by the district from outside persons in memory of an individual or event. So is that to say that if someone wanted to donate something that didn't have a name on it, that we wouldn't accept it? Is that the intent of that?
There's a lot of caution about planting trees and things like that because, and some of the board members will remember this, there's a tree here at the high school, and then all of a sudden you've grown to the point that you need to renovate, and really the tree needs to come down, and that creates problems too. So, I hear what Jill is saying, but I think that if you went in that direction, you would need something in policy that said, the garden may be moved at some point if needed. But that's why they do not recommend planting trees, because you become very attached to the tree.
Oh, I totally understand why we don't do trees. I think the garden is a little bit different in that it's just a space, not necessarily a specific plant, but just the activity of it together, maybe. But my question was more around, sort of the one thing that we had before us was, they wanted to donate a statue, and with or without a name. I mean, I don't know where they came down on without a name, but if they said, we're comfortable with no name on it, just as a donation to the community, does this policy preclude us from accepting it?
I think it does, because although a name may not be engraved, there gifts like that are made with an intention that it's around a named person potentially creates the situation of lack of equity that we're concerned about. So I think that's my recollection of why we included that in policy.
And while in the moment, I would say that, folks may know what it was related to. Over time, I think that's, as things move through, I don't know, that's an interesting, I hadn't really thought that bullet point through until we were just talking about it. It's an interesting piece of it. Vali.
So I have a follow-up question related to that. If anyone wants to donate something to the district, a physical memento of any sort, do we accept it if it's not allowed, if it's not attached to anyone's passing?
Well,
say if I
would
said,
say
I love this district and I just want to give them a bench just because, but not to commemorate anything or anybody.
Right, so we did allow like benches when we worked on the field. I think what gets hard around things like this is because, and obviously we've had other things gifted, right? We've had money gifted to the high school for needs for students. I think we've had computers in my time here gifted. But this feels a little bit different when it's gifting for so like with the computer, sometimes we've just said, no, we don't need, some used computers, even though, the intent is good, right? It becomes much more difficult to say no when it's being done in memory of someone. So it does put even though I guess, yes, the superintendent has the ability to say no, it's more difficult to do so when you know that it's in memory of that person.
No, I understand that. It just may raise questions. If someone who doesn't have a commemorative nature to their gift is allowed to gift, while someone who does is not. I understand where you're coming from, but I see the potential for, I don't know, just frustration on the other end of the person who wants to gift. That now for how long can they not gift? Say I have a family member who works at this school and I want to give something and that person dies, and then how long does it apply that I cannot gift anything because it may be interpreted in memory of someone? We probably should think about that too.
And as I think about the equity piece, I'm curious of, I can donate money for a scholarship in the name of someone, a named scholarship, as opposed to a donation of something that betters the campus with no name on it. I'm not sure that necessarily accomplishes the equity we're trying to do. I don't know. Jen.
So not to add another layer, but so those of us that are from Durham know that there's a full array of bricks in front of the school that have whatever you wanted to put on them as a family, if you chose to do that. I did not do one here, but there are also bricks here, I believe, correct, that people had the ability to put whatever they wanted. So just being the devil's advocate, I think I'd be upset if I couldn't, add a brick. Maybe if I wanted to now say, I don't know. I just remember when, those bricks were all in the spirit of fundraising and of, community involvement. But if I remember correctly, there were very little parameters put on what you could put on your brick. And I'm with 99%, I would say there's at least one at Durham that's a in-memory brick. If not many more, I don't know about out here. So again, not to add to that, it's just all these things that you think of that, you are allowed to kind of put your name on something in some way. So maybe they thought of that.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of doing the spreadsheets with all those bricks out there. It's a heavy sarcasm. That was not fun. There is at least one that is in memory of out there, and I think I remember that part of our discussion around grandfathering, because obviously we can't undo things that have been fundraisers, and the benches were fundraisers as well, that we had invited particular classes that had already graduated to participate in that opportunity. But had the district had a policy in place at the time, similar to what we've just proposed, then I imagine this board would have said to the track and field group, great, just be sure that anything, the pavers you're suggesting have to adhere to our policy because it's on district grounds. So I don't think that presents necessarily a huge problem.
Maura.
So, thank you for the thoughtful policy, first of all. I'm also wondering if we can broaden the types of contributions accepted, but I can see how it can be problematic to accept a specific thing and the equity issues around it. So I'm wondering if we could allow like a directed donation. Specifically, I was wondering if we could allow like artwork to be donated, or maybe someone who had a child or a member of the staff that was really involved in a certain sport could direct it to, the booster club or the maintenance of the field or whatever they wanted to do. But I was thinking of artwork, but I realized the complexities of giving like a specific piece of artwork. So maybe instead it could be that we just allow a donation that is for something and it's more general, that you say you want to give on behalf of the student or the staff member that was lost.
Vali?
Yeah, I'm really conflicted about the restrictive nature of gift giving in this policy that doesn't align with other activities that we engage in where we do allow gifts, which are very similar to what we're not allowing here. So if we really want to promote equity, then that means that in the future, if we have another building or another field or another whatever, we really shouldn't allow for any names of anybody. And then you really are, in a way, running the risk of not being able to fundraise because people do respond to those things. And that's why we have those bricks. Not only do we have bricks with names, we have different sizes of bricks for the amount of money that you gave. So we just have to be really consistent, I think. If we're going to say we don't want to undermine equity in any way, and we start here, then we need to go and review all the other policies and make sure that we do the same for all the policies and all the activities that we conduct in the district. Otherwise, we allow the same level of restrictiveness for this policy that we allow for all the others. And I do understand that this one is different because of all the emotional ramifications of someone dying and maybe ideations and all of that. So as far as that goes, I'm fully in support of waiting an appropriate number of months or years or whatever is necessary to prevent any downfall effect and causing other people to react to the death in a way that we don't want, that's emotional. But going farther than that, I think we're just getting ourselves in trouble because we're being very inconsistent. And whereas I really appreciate the effort to be as equitable as we can, I think we want to be consistent as well as equitable.
Maddie?
We spent a lot of time talking about the naming of buildings past and hypothetical in the future, and perhaps we should have included those two policies that we cite in here, the naming facilities and the community use of facilities, so that you could all see it. But I think, and Cynthia, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or if you, I think we determined that if we were presented with somebody who wanted to build a building, I mean, we have a facility, a large, expensive facility named for somebody who is living. Now, had she not been living at the time that was built and this policy were in place, I don't know. I would expect that the board would want to discuss that opportunity. And so I felt comfortable putting this general policy in place and referring to the naming of facilities policy and the use of facilities policy for other considerations, but that still allows the board to deliberate a particular opportunity. I don't think that we can expect that this policy is going to cover all things for all time. I mean, we tried to imagine many hypothetical scenarios, but I'm sure it was not exhaustive. I think, I mean, and I heard the use of the word restrictive before. I mean, I think we all really wrestled with this. The intent behind this is not to restrict the expression of grief, but to allow for what we feel the experts have said is the most appropriate in a place of learning. As difficult as it is, and as disappointing as I know it might be for some families today, I stand by what we've proposed.
Jen?
I'm just wondering if, going back to Vali's original, about a one place, maybe at each school, that does have a small spot to list a name, if they want to, if a family wants to, that would, in my thought process, which would allow us to say, this is what we do. So therefore, we don't do anything else. We don't accept gifts. We don't put names anywhere else. We have one location where we recognize the people that we lost while they were either employed in RSU5 or going to school in RSU5. And whether that's one spot in each school, I don't know, or one spot in the community, I don't know. But I feel like that would give us an opportunity to say, we do that, therefore most everything else is off the table. Just as I'm not saying that that's, even, it's just an idea in order to, that's very equitable in my opinion. And it also allows us to very easily not have to entertain, a bench, a tree, a this, a that, which obviously this policy keeps us from doing that. But I also think it may leave people feeling it, and I know you guys did the research and talked to the experts, so I'm not one of those. I'm just saying this as a person. I feel like that would alleviate that one little piece that concerns me about this policy, which is not recognizing our lost community member. We recognize the championships of skiing. We recognize the artwork that, has people's names on it, right? Those are going to stay there like that. So we recognize all of those things of the people that are living that have gone through these schools, but we were afraid to put a name of someone we lost. I feel like that's just kind of, that's hard for me to think that we're going to ignore that.
Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just speak for myself. As a member of the committee, I think I would be absolutely open to looking at that particular aspect again. I think just returning to some of our notes and some of our research around that, because I admit we were trying to cover a lot of ground, and so that was one of the pieces that in my mind. I'm not quite as clear in my recollection of exactly the construction of that, or what the train of evidence and ideas were on that. So I think I would be very, very open to that. I think just to Vale's point, I think in terms of the consistency, I suppose where I find myself on that is to say that if we determine that, particularly around an issue of equity, that we have hit upon something that we are not doing, and that is in the best service of the students given our remit, then we should do that. We should have to revisit all the other policies, and we should take that back, and because I think that's in the spirit of, I think, the work that we've been asked to do. So I think that we very much were thinking about that this is restrictive and how it would be precedent setting, and that is complex. But I think again, at the end of the day, I think our sense was that, in large part, that this we felt. In good conscience that we could present this to the board and to the community as the thing that is best in service of the well-being and the mental health of the students around an incident such as this.
Beth.
I'm just curious, Jen, when you were saying, like, if we had something and, it was a given that, names would go on it, is that in place of anything else? Like, are you saying kind of like then all the other stuff that's allowable is kind of gone, or what are you visioning? I guess I
was really thinking of it as one ad. Like, I feel like, the policy, I think it was very well done, and, wherever it would contradict, I was thinking it as of a one ad to an allowable would be a name would be placed on a plaque. I mean, for lack of a better word, right? Let's pretend it's a plaque. It's a plaque somewhere that has the name, and that is our identifying the loss of one of our community members. Like I said, just as we identify that piece of art, I just feel like if we're not comfortable saying the name, like that just kind of, that feels wrong to me. It just I don't know what, I mean, it feels like we're trying to push it away. Whereas we identify students in so many ways and we identify things in so many ways, but we just don't want to put a name on that. So that's the only thing.
It's hard for me because I think I totally hear that. I hear that, we should recognize and acknowledge the loss of a community member or a staff member. But I also recognize that the people who are an expert in this, the Center for Grieving Children, whose whole reason for existing is helping, children and families get through situations exactly like this, is saying that this isn't in the best interest of the kids. And for me, that's hard to reconcile. Like, I may feel like I want a place where I could go and see that, but I'm not sure I'm willing to override what they're telling me is best for kids. And I don't know. So I struggle with that.
So I didn't help write this policy, but I think the committee has done a wonderful job with it. So I thank you for that. And I guess, Jen, I want to address just what you said. I think that for me, the difference is that we're not saying we're sweeping it under the rug. When you look at it, remembrances of flowers, personal messages, and mementos may be allowed near lockers, parking spaces. I think that this policy allows for what Zune was talking about, which is grieving at that moment in time. I think that if tomorrow I said, we're going to redo the artwork that we have here in the cafeteria at Freeport High School, and we're going to remove that, and we're going to put it up with this latest print that just got this national recognition, everyone would understand that, and there wouldn't be any pushback. The difference is once you put something on the plaque or whatever the memorial is, and that all of a sudden time has moved on and you want to do something different, there's so much emotion, as Vali mentioned, attached to that. So I see that as very different.
Vali?
Yeah, I totally see that. I mean, if I understand Jen correctly, this would be something small that could probably be moved, not a tree that dies, but something that could be moved if necessary. And I also want to make sure that everyone who worked on this policy knows that I'm super appreciative of this work, because I feel as though I've been only saying negative things, and that's not the intent at all. I really appreciate this work, and I've read a lot about this issue, so I know what you're trying to accomplish, and it's just really difficult. But to Becky's point about the advice of the experts, what I have read, and it may be in conflict with other information out there, is that time really does make a difference. You do not want to put a name or a memorial up within the first year of somebody's death, but then after a certain time elapses, then it's safe to do that. I'm not saying that we would or should do that, but I'm just saying that according to the experts, that is an appropriate way to handle a situation like that.
Zune?
I think there's a difference between giving something that the school or the school district is going to need anyway versus giving something specifically as a memorial to someone. If we're going to build a building and it's essential to fundraising to have a name attached to that, that's the way it has always been done. It's very different if there is no need for, say, a big shed or a statue, and then someone says, well, in honor of my mother, I would like you to accept this structure here, which would serve no other purpose. I think that, to me, in my mind, is the way I separate what is an acceptable donation and what might requires a bit more consideration and deliberation. Let's say that I pass away and my in-laws decided to give a statue of the Dalai Lama to RSU5 in honor of me. If I were alive, I would object to that. On the other hand, if, let's say I die tonight and the school would like to raise money for, say, a computational center that's going to teach STEM, and let's say that my in-laws decided to contribute $100 million to that, I think if I were alive, I would welcome it.
We would too.
So to me, a thing that would have to be built that would benefit everybody anyway is different from a thing that is specifically for a memorial for somebody because it means something to someone.
Colin?
Yeah, I very much appreciate what Zune is saying, and also these very magical in-laws that he has.
I wish I had that kind of in-laws.
And I absolutely concur with that. I think also the question of gifts in service of whom and on what occasion, I think, is also part of the question of grief, right? Sort of if the is the donation of something to facilitate grieving? Is it to facilitate that process for the students actively? That's a very complex issue. I don't know quite how to think about that. I suppose the only other thing I just found myself thinking in response to what Jen was suggesting, and again, I still think we should take it back to the committee and consider what it would be like to have a location, a plaque, something of that nature at each school. I think just full transparency, I think the only way I would feel comfortable even considering that would have to be some sort of mandate that they all happen simultaneously. They all get created simultaneously, and that there are funds available for all of those memorials at each of the schools to be created simultaneously. And my head is spinning of like how exactly that would work. And that just seems an added layer of complexity, because again, otherwise sort of the creation of like, it's possible if you want it to exist and any school can do it. It's like that, I think, again, starts to open up the questions of equity that we very much were trying to address in another way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of those logistical questions. So do you go back in time? Do you start today and move forward in time? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to those things are. I think the policy is thoughtful. I think it tries to come up with, how can we meet the needs of our community, of staff and students who we're responsible for in a difficult time. I do like the distinction between, a memorial for memorial's sake or something in benefit of the community. I think I like the policy the way it's written. My only hang up is we will not accept any items, right? So if there was something in need, this would say we couldn't do it. I mean, I definitely don't think we want permanent memorials, which to me includes a name. But if someone, was donating something, to them personally, it may feel like a memorial, but it's to someone who walked up to it, they would never know that it wasn't a piece of art or a piece of, sculpture or whatever it ended up being. My line is I would be comfortable with that. But so for me, that would really be the only bullet I would like to see changed. But I feel like we need to give the committee here a little bit of direction because we've gone in a lot of different plays. Maura.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off, Michelle.
No.
I'd be interested in having the committee consider that, what you just said, Michelle. Or also if we could accept monetary donations. So if we're not going to accept, like, is there anything in this policy that would preclude us from accepting money?
I don't think so. I think that's you could do a memorial scholarship. You could donate money towards an existing the Peace Garden, right? Those are acceptable uses, right? If I'm reading it right.
I'm wondering if we could also accept donations, like I said before, directed donations for specific departments or something like that. Like you could specify. I know that's one way. In all the emails I get, like fundraising emails, I know that's how like my university tries to get money from me by, appealing to my connection to certain things in the community. But I'm wondering if folks who maybe even wanted to donate in honor of someone's retirement, who had been an art teacher in RSU5, wanted to give money and said, I'd really like this to be spent in the art, on the arts or something like that. So it wouldn't have to just be in memoriam of someone. It could be a donation that you're giving because you have a specific particular connection to a certain part of the RSU or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, to Vali's point, I think a lot of fundraising, that's what it comes from. I mean, I'm wearing red. I was at the Go Red for Women lunch today. They raised a lot of money for heart health in women. And, and the way they do that is they speak to, real life issues and they make it personal. And, that's what speaks to people to donate. So I don't think we want to necessarily say that you can't, if you feel strongly about something. But Maddie.
So I guess the direction that I feel we need in order to go back and work on this further, whether it's a monetary donation directed somewhere particular or a piece of granite in a peace garden, we need to know what this board is saying about attributions, because I'm hearing both sides. Names.
Oh, names. I was like, what are we asking? Jen.
So I just want to again say, I do feel like my suggestions of having a name are definitely contradicting, like Michelle said, what the experts are saying, which I don't like to do that because I think that's following the experts is really a good way to go. And I'm gonna, full disclosure, I lost a friend in high school, so like I definitely have personal things that are attached to this. So I'm not in any way, I will definitely not die on the hill of not having, I'm totally comfortable leaving the policy the way it is. I just, felt that I wanted to say what I wanted to say, but I'm definitely not like someone who's going to say, hey, let's go against all the experts and do, go rogue and do this. So.
Okay. So we love straw polls. Yeah. You do. A grammarian straw poll hater. Do we, I guess I know there's a couple folks that feel comfortable with having some kind of, I think everyone is kind of in favor, and correct me if I'm wrong, with not having memorials dotting the campuses with a name here and a name there, and so I think we've accomplished that with and I don't think anyone would want to see that come back. So, I mean, what I think I've heard is like, do we want to have a centralized location in each school, in the district, that has the names of all of our community members that we've lost? And I guess I'm interested to see, how many of the board members are interested in hearing more about that, and what that might look like, or if you feel like we don't want names. So who's interested in hearing more about maybe some kind of centralized? Okay. So, Susanna.
I mean, I guess for me, my concerns before I'd really be interested in that are the parameters. And, not only how far do you backdate, but if somebody just graduated and then they died over the summer, or they've graduated, but their academic career was here, their affiliation, whatever it is, a teacher who was here for 35 years, and even, a couple years later they died, but they're still like most associated with being here. How do you say that, you missed the deadline?
It's the perpetual slippery slope there,
It
Susanna.
is, exactly. But, and then how far back do you go? And people who were here very briefly, whether they moved into the district, they were just hired for a term, whatever it is. I think there's just a lot of parameters that I'd want negotiated and explored before I'd be comfortable with any of putting names on anything.
So my thought on the names question is, do we want our policy committee doing research like that and coming together with a proposal? Is there enough board support for that to make it worth their while? Or is the general feeling of the board that, we don't want to have names? If the general feeling is we don't want to have names, the way this policy is laid out, then I don't want them, running down all sorts of potential scenarios if it's not what the board's going to move forward with. Maddie?
So speaking personally, I like what Jill suggested at the beginning of this conversation, that there be a garden space, a treeless garden, a short perennial garden space at every school, and that might be existing in some schools, and it might be new in other schools, where there are no names, but it's generally thought of as a place of remembrance, and a place of peace, and a place of tranquility, and that there may be clubs in every school where there's, once a year there's the opportunity to do some planting, or a few times a year there's some maintenance done for whatever reason, and people could bring their own personal reasons to that space, but without names. That's my preference.
And I think we can accomplish that without the policy, right? I mean, that can be just something we do, right? I mean, when we try to think of not making our policies too prescriptive, and Jill.
Yeah, I think that last bullet, when it specifically says Freeport High School, when that last bullet under allowable, it just kind of jumps out that the Freeport High School was the only one listed. I feel like that could be reworded, and with the idea that if it needed to be moved because we are growing, there's still a space, because I think the value in an outdoor space like that is invaluable to your school. I mean, it's just invaluable to have like a space where you can take kids and just be quiet. It doesn't have to be because of a death. It could be just to get outside and de-stress, but still be there. I mean, I think about the Yellow Tulip project that kind of was, came out of a very tragic death situation, and many schools have those tulips come up in the spring, and that's the kind of, that's the thing that I'm like, oh, that would be a great space, and that would be, a lot of schools have those outside somewhere. But yeah, thank you, Maddie.
I keep looking at Piper. I think your hand's going up, but it's not. That's all right. I think Colin's waving his pencil at me all the time. So, Colin.
Just a question of, because I do not wish to create a policy that is prescriptive. However, I think in the spirit of equity, I think I'm curious what it would take for each of the schools to evaluate the question of creating such a space, because I think that I suppose the gray area that I guess I get a little uncomfortable about, to Jill's point, is saying if one exists, you can donate something to it, but that's not equitable. So I guess I'm just curious. I'm sort of looking somewhere between Michelle and Becky. I'm curious for.
I'm going to quickly go.
Yeah. I think At one level, it's a wonderful idea. I think at another level, even the Peace Garden at the high school is very difficult to maintain. So I do think that we should take some time to reflect on that and really talk about what might that look like. I know at Moore Street, space is really limited, for example. And so I think it would be good for us to be able to talk to the principals and just think about, like, what might that look like? What do you see as the issues? Because in every district that I've been in, it is difficult enough to just maintain, the lawns or the fields or the playing fields, and that many times when gardens are put in, all of a sudden it's like, who's doing them over the summer? So I think there's thought that needs to be really put into that, like, because to me, if you're going to create that space, I hate to see a garden that's overrun with weeds. Even at the Peace Garden, when I was there within the past year, I found myself like reaching down and starting to weed, because, a garden is only as beautiful as the care that it's given.
Maybe we could find a retired superintendent who likes to weed gardens. You can be the crossing guard. You can be the crossing guard. You can be the garden weeder, which makes you understand why they plant trees. That's true. Okay, so I think that's sort of a takeaway. We can, if the general consensus of the board is that concept of a space in each school, sort of for remembrance or reflection, and talk with the individual principals and see the feasibility of something maybe they already have, or if there's something else had to be created, what that would look like. And we're never trying to add more things to their work plate. So is there a way to accomplish that with minimal additional work for them? And I guess the general consensus was without names. So what is there other adjustments to the policy? Colin?
Can I just ask a question in reference to Maura's question about donations for particular departments? I mean, my sense is that if it is a non-memorial or remembrance donation, that would not be covered by this policy. But so I'm just curious, does that exist elsewhere? Is there a policy, I guess we could reference in terms of saying, all right, if you, I'm curious about that, but I guess.
But I think the question is if you were to say there was, like you said, there was an art teacher who passed away or retired, and somebody said, I want to, in honor of the work they did for our students, I want to donate to the art department. I mean, technically that's in remembrance of someone. Mm-hmm. So are we saying we do want that, don't want that? I mean, obviously we wouldn't put a name to it, right? They might tell us who it's for, but the proceeds wouldn't go attached to a name anywhere. I think it does spur people to, sort of donate things. And I'm not sure we want to eliminate that possibility for people. But we don't want names. Yeah.
I think it's potentially helpful to add that in that bullet, about, what's allowable, like, because right now it says what's not allowable. We don't accept gifts, but we could say there are many avenues that a donation that you want to make in memory of someone could be directed toward booster clubs, particular schools, general funds, departments within the school, but not named.
Right.
Not named contribution. I don't know how I don't know what word we would use.
We just talked about a general memorial fund.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think you guys can come up with maybe some wording around that to think about that. I would still say I'd like to see us revisit that fourth bullet and just have it sort of maybe end after the school unit will not install permanent memorials in memory of an individual or event, and eliminate the part that says we won't accept anything that anybody gives us from outside persons. I think I might just strike that piece of the sentence, but that's in the non-allowable, the fourth bullet, where it says the school unit will not install permanent memorials such as tree, nor will any items be accepted by the district from outside persons. I think I would just say, I would probably strike the nor will any items be accepted by the district from outside persons, and just have it say, the school unit shall not install permanent memorials such as trees in memory of an individual or an event. Molly?
Yeah, I'm also looking at the first bullet of the last page, the one that says contributions may be made to a general memorial scholarship fund. I'm okay with that, but then it goes on to says that the school unit, established by the school unit memorializing a member or members of the school community. Does that mean then that scholarship will have a name attached to it or will not have a name attached to it? Because it's not clear.
I read it as it would have a name attached to it.
That's the way I'm reading it. But if we want to avoid naming, and
was that not the intent of
this would be definitely against the goal of equity, because then you'll have a scholarship name with a lot of money for someone who's very popular and no scholarship at all for someone who's not popular or doesn't have any money. So that one I would like the committee to think about. And also the third on the allowable list, the flowers, the messages, the mementos. How do we envision equity in that situation when we have, again, a staff or student who's very well loved and gets piles of flowers and messages, and then another one who doesn't? Is that going to create pain? And do we just want to say the school will provide flowers and we have an assembly and everybody gets the same number of flowers? I don't know, but it's something to think about. Then if we allow anyone to bring the flowers and the mementos, it may create a painful situation.
Microphone.
We were told that that's kind of what's going on now, and we didn't want to stop it. That's
yeah, and I think we also did we did discuss that, and I think it is an issue, and I think it's an important question. I think we did at one point go down a little bit of an alternate path where, again, it got into the prescriptive, where the in the event of the passing of a student, the school will do this. So there is a prescribed sequence of things that the school would do for every student. And my recollection of that was both that we didn't like that it was prescriptive, and also that it was putting a great deal of pressure on the staff without any additional support. But very much valid. I think that I'm not sure how to reconcile that particular concern. I think maybe the way I personally framed that was that since that is in the immediate experience of grief, it's creating the greatest allowance for young people to express their grief, and yes, that will be unequal in terms of where that comes from and who receives it. But I didn't see a way that we could address that. I'm not saying it's not possible. I just didn't see a way that we could.
Beth.
I had the same thought. I'm glad you said something, Valley, because I was thinking about that as well. And I guess where I came to was that it's not permanent, and I think that the whole thing around the permanence was more where we wanted to really, obviously that's not going to be equitable, and there's no way that you can do that. I don't think it's possible. And I think some things we just have to let go if we don't have the control over it. But that's where I came to it as the discussion has worn on, that it wasn't a permanent thing that was inequitable.
across the board.
Yeah, and not a mental health professional in any stretch of the phrase, but I feel like that's probably one of the things that the kids feel, or the adults feel like they're bringing something, right? That's their involvement to that. And so just to have something already there prescribed, I think you don't get the therapeutic piece for the kids. So the lack of permanence, I think, is important, because I think it will be a little bit different depending on what the situation is, and I think we have to be okay with that. So, okay, how you guys feeling? We're pretty much back to your policy, so good work. with a few tweaks, but all right. So, are we doing a first read, or are we tabling the first read? And if they're making, are you guys? I think we can do a first read, right? Because I don't see like huge rewrites, right? Yes. You're okay with that? Yes. Okay, great. So, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of first read of policy FFA, memorials and remembrances? Vali and Mara, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Not opposed. Yes, it was. Okay, so we are back to the budget. Dr. Foley was kind and didn't require the admins to be here tonight. I had a whole list of questions for each of them individually. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Okay, so as Becky mentioned in her superintendent's update at the beginning, this purple package matches last week's package, with the exception that $27,500, was that the amount? $27,310 has been added for additional athletic trainer hours based on the conversation last week. I know this is something that you had asked about, Valley. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch last week's meeting. You did? Okay, so you're up to speed on how that went. So that is now included in the budget that's before you. So do folks have comments? Actually, you know what? We're gonna take a motion, and then we'll have the discussion about it. If I could find here it is. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the FY23 superintendent's recommended budget? Susanna and Beth. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns? Beth.
I was quiet during the last budget deliberation, but I would like to say tonight publicly that I am really impressed by Dr. Foley's and the administrators and everybody that has worked hard, Peggy and Scott and everybody that's worked hard on this budget. We're in a time when things are skyrocketing in cost, and I feel like they have been very, very discerning around what's needed, yet still being able to propel our district forward where we want to be and continue. So I just want to publicly thank Dr. Foley and all the administrators that worked so hard on this. So thank you.
Maura.
I just want to echo Beth's thanks and also say that I really strongly support this this thoughtful budget, because I really feel like it's aligned with our mission and vision for our school district. So thank you so much, Dr. Foley, and to all our administrators for your hard work.
Maddie.
It's a bandwagon I want to get on. No, we don't all need to. But I wanted to in particular say that, you know, there have been times in looking at the prioritization list when I've had questions about what fell in that third tier and felt the need to do a lot of probing. And I was very comfortable with the responses a couple meetings back about our readiness for the two things that remain in the third tier. And those are things I'd like to see coming forward, but I feel like we have a great strategy around it, and they'll come at the appropriate time. And so I'm really appreciative of that. And I'm very excited about this, I'm forgetting what we're calling it, the thank you, early intervention team. I think this is a game changer, and I'm just so excited for our kids and our families, what that will mean, and for the teachers as well. How helpful will that be for our early education teachers to have that in-house? I think it's a game changer, and I'm excited to propose that to our communities.
Yeah, I will agree that I think the budget is thoughtful. I think it's respectful of our communities and the capacity that our community members have to support the school budget. I hope that we see, strong participation at the annual budget meeting this year, because this is the first time we've had one in 3 years. So hopefully people haven't forgotten how that goes and show up and participate and talk it through. And, at the end of the day, I want to see our budget pass with, really strong results in June. I know I asked a lot of questions, as I always do, on the budget, which required some work to come back with answers. So it's not lost on me that I try to say I don't add more things to your plate, and I totally did. So I appreciate what you came back with. I felt much better prepared to make a decision on those things based on those answers. So I really appreciate the effort that you guys all put in. I think this is a very responsible budget in pretty much every way. Any other comments, questions? Oh, Candy.
It's okay. I want to also echo how important the early intervention team is. Coming from my background as special ed and then early childhood education, it's just absolutely wonderful. But I also wanted to let you know, and I guess you had a Region 10 meeting this week, Becky? That's what they...
Last week,
okay. But the HVAC program will be up and running, and we have 6 students who are interested in it, and currently we have 62 students attending Region 10, quite a few. And I just learned this from talking to them, that they base the basis for what each school district does in terms of what they're charging. It's based on the census population in the districts.
All right. Are we ready to vote on the budgets? It always seems so anticlimactic. We've been talking about it for so long. Which is a good problem to have, right? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? None opposed. Great. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we are back to our third opportunity for public input this evening. We have our public comment. I always look at Cynthia to see if she's seen anybody out there. Okay. All right. Well, then I would take a motion to adjourn. Susanna and Maddie, thank you. All those in favor? Great. And we do not have a meeting next week. So I know we've had 3 in a row. So I appreciate everyone's effort, and we'll see you guys in April.